What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Cobra Kai Season 6, Part 3, go over my final thoughts, go over just the emotions that I'm feeling sitting here having watched the final episodes. Finally, it took me like a day and a half. I watched 2 episodes yesterday, and I watched the rest of it today. And largely, I think it is a masterpiece. I mean, I would say this, as a whole, Cobra Kai as a show, 10 out of 10. Okay, this show gave me pretty much everything you could ever ask for. Actually, who would even ask for this in the first place? You have to almost be given it and say, oh my dear God, and then kind of be in for the ride. The show is so good. It really is. It's got such amazing, to me, characters and arcs and themes and messages. Obviously, as the martial arts part that I've talked about a lot when I do these reviews, I'm a martial artist, so when it comes to the show, I definitely watch it with like a more strict eye. And I will say that has been a bigger problem with the show, I would say, as it has continued, is I think the kind of pullback on almost the legit martial arts. And but we'll talk about that as this goes. Generally, though, this final part I do think was amazing. I think it's tough because I do feel like at times it was rushed. I do feel at times that I wanted to see just a little bit more with character XYZ. But you cannot take away, and I will not take away, and I don't think the negatives at all outweigh the pros. The show made me tear up. I'd say maybe 3 or 4 times in those 5 episodes. I mean, it was only 5 episodes. It wasn't even 5 hours. It was like 3.5 hours, and it got me multiple times. I mean, number one, I would say more than anything, was Kreese and Johnny. This is going to go into spoilers because how can you not, at this point? That conversation was 10 out of 10. Actually, I would like to say it was an 11 out of 10. I think those are 2 great actors. Obviously, they've been together for a long time, not just in the show, but going back to Karate Kid. And to just see, Johnny cry and, kind of air out those feelings that he has felt for 35 years, really probably almost 40 years at this point, right? And then for Kreese, and again, I think Martin Kove is a really good actor, and to see him cry and, have the hand on the shoulder and Johnny pushes him away, and then they hug, and he says, I'm sorry, son, and, there's nothing I can do. I can't fix the past. I wish there was a way to do it, fix it now. That was, like, again, I think it was a perfect conversation. I say that as just one example because there was just so many times, whether it was saying farewell to these characters, when Sam was going to Okinawa and she's saying goodbye to the parents, like that felt pretty emotional because you don't know, like we know Daniel's going to be in Karate Kid. I don't think it's going to be very long, and I highly doubt really anybody comes along with him for Karate Kid. In fact, I think through interviews with Cobra Kai, we kind of know that it was just him that went to film with Karate Kid. Don't know that 1,000%, but pretty confident. So, like, just saying goodbye to these characters, getting Dimitri and Hawk, a few more times, Terry Silver, and kind of working through that. Now, I will say something like Silver, I mean, he is such a great actor, and his arc and the seasons that he was like the primary antagonist were terrifying. He is a phenomenal villain, and I think even better than he was, in Karate Kid 3. But they did, I think, rush what was going on here, and they've always done kind of outlandish, kind of crazy things, but him kind of stooping to the level of what they did with Robbie, and then what he was going to do with Johnny's family, right? And then you have Kreese that kind of steps in. I mean, even that to a degree was like, I loved it, but I also kind of hated it because it's like you just killed off those 2, which is insane. Insane that, I mean, you kind of expected it, I guess, also with their age and just, the status of the show. But to see those 2 go out the way that they did was kind of freaking epic, but also sad, also partially aggravating. I mean, I could just kind of go over moment by moment, but, the lead up to the finale of the whole tournament. Now, I will say, okay, the martial artist side of me, I think the show throughout it all has always done a good job of like literally getting me on the edge of the seat. Like I go like this. I'm like this watching the final battles of like any of these seasons. Like it legitimately gets me hyped. It legitimately makes me feel tense and like I don't know, what's going to happen. It has done that every time without fail, and even in these biggest moments, it's still done it, right? Like Cobra Kai needs to make up points. You have Miguel's fight, you have Tori's fight, you have all this stuff, right? And while I think the martial arts part has dropped because I think it focuses a lot more now on kind of these quick cuts and then like slow-mo. Some of like their arm stuff, like what they're blocking and whatnot, like some of it looks good. I mean, I know they have like legit martial artists, some of them, right? Some of the opposing side tends to be like legit martial artists, and you can tell when those kicks are really, really crisp and like everything just looks really good. And I think generally like just the cast does a pretty good job. I was actually really happy with Johnny's final fight. I mean, that training kind of montage for like 10-15 minutes beforehand, he was doing, seemingly he was, by the way, no stunt double, maybe. He was doing some great kicks. He was doing some great punches, great blocks. I commend him. And, you know, that's the martial artist side. Then to lead up to that freaking fight, again, I was like pulling my hair out, where it's like the themes and trying to replicate the past while also kind of doing it in like an original way, right? Like he didn't do the kick that Daniel did, but he swept the leg in his own unique way, right? So he won it. He won it like at the buzzer, you know, coming out from 2-0, winning it. Just the similarities, and even when Daniel goes over to him and says, "You're all right, Lawrence," in the same way that he said it to him back, you know, many, many moons ago. So those kind of moments were unbelievable, and so tense and so freaking good. And I do think the battles themselves, or the fight, I mean, I keep calling them battles. They had the stakes of battles, but they were, you know, a sparring tournament, right? They still managed to, I think, get me so freaking into it, and I commend the show for that. It really deserves it. I do think because there's been so much fighting, like literally like combat type stuff as the shows have gone on. You know, I do think maybe it's because of like the timing, like the schedules. I do think a lot of it has become more lazy. A big stickler for me, very oftentimes when they do some of these like spinning kicks and some of these just roundhouses or whatever, when they even score a point, you look and their guard is just completely like their hands are not up. They would get slaughtered, you know, in real life. Even in the final battle, you know, one thing that kind of ticked me off just a little, Johnny grabs him, right? He grabs him on his gi. He goes like, you could have just punched him and you could have got a point, but instead he grabbed him. They kind of got tangled up, and then the judge had to come to separate. My wife was watching next to me. I said, he just grabbed him right here. He could have just punched him right in the chest because he made contact anyway. Could have just punched him and it would have been fine. Rule changes like drawing blood does not work one time, but it does work another. I mean, like in a real tournament, you wouldn't be able to draw blood, or you would get disqualified, or you'd have a point removed. So small things like that. But again, that's more the martial arts side. I will say that has gotten weaker. Even like the Silver versus Kreese fight, there is an epicness to it. These are two legendary characters that have been around for a long time. Once Kreese gets knocked into like the oil, you kind of know where things are going to go. At least I did. I was, okay, he's smoking, and then now you have something to ignite a flame, right? So, okay, it's going there. You could tell that. At the same time, it's like, well, Terry Silver, his actor, I do believe he does do martial arts, but he's not like a super high up like black belt or anything. He did look like he was doing as much as he possibly could in that fight, but you could tell every time it was like over the back of Kreese, like that wasn't actually him. And, it's two guys, one in his late 70s and one in his late 60s, fighting. And they used a lot of really kind of weird camera angles, in that fight on that yacht. They pulled out like to show the freaking boat several times, and it's like it's the limitations of the two, and that's all, or maybe even more like Martin Kove more than anything, which is fine because he's a legendary actor and he's so good when he's just standing there talking. He looks intimidating. There's ways of making him intimidating. He doesn't even need to fight, but then when you do need him to fight, you really cannot do it at all, right? So things like that I thought were actually severely weak, and those did pop up here and there. But again, there are cons, but the pros far, like saying goodbye to everybody, putting everybody in their final positions, having Chosen go off and kind of ending that arc, having Daniel and Johnny now, they're literally basically co-teaching, but they all have their own thing. Johnny Lawrence gets Cobra Kai back, right? Like these kind of moments are incredible. And so all of those goodbyes, all of those epic moments, the conclusions to these kind of tense storylines and stuff, like the victories in the battle and in the tournaments, they were all legendary. I mean, that's I think what makes the show so freaking good. But there are times of just sitting down and talking. Like I said, probably the best scene was that Johnny and Kreese scene, and that's not this epic martial arts thing. That's just two older guys just actually crying to each other, which sounds kind of weird when you say it, but it's it's a 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10. It's so good. So, those moments, the moments again of these messages, and Miyagi teaching Daniel, kind of his final lesson there too, right? Where it's actually funny because like I was taught that immediately. That was something that my, teacher would always stress. It's about walking away. Whenever you get into a fight, literally the first thing you do is you turn around and leave. It's only when you are attacked that you have to do what you have to do, right? You have to defend yourself. That's what I was always taught. And it's funny because that's what Daniel was always taught. That's kind of generally what martial artists do say to each other. I think they at least should, in my belief. It is funny that it's like this kind of epic final lesson. He has to have a dream sequence when the main lesson, the final lesson he has to learn is like, you don't always have to fight, which is kind of something he already knew, right? But maybe he kind of forgot it. I thought that scene, by the way, was fine. I'm not a huge fan. I mean, there was a lot of AI right there, using with Miyagi. I mean, I think they did as good of a job as they could have with their budget. I would have probably preferred that you stayed away from that stuff just entirely. I did think it was better than, I forget if it was part 1 or I think it was part 2 that Miyagi was also in it. I thought just the way his mouth moved in part 2, I thought was terrible. Part 3, I thought that, this kind of dream sequence with the skeleton people, literally skeletons in the closet. I thought that was a lot better done, but I also didn't really think you needed to have done it. So again, like minor nitpicks here and there. The martial artist side of me could probably go on for longer, but overall, again, like it got me. Like I was when Johnny and Kreese were tearing up, I was tearing up. Like it was so good to like just go through it. And it's sad. It's legitimately sad. It's I don't watch TV. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't watch a lot of movies. When I say goodbye to like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul was like the last like legit thing that I think I watched. It's tough like saying goodbye to those shows because I just think of them as so legendary. This was different. This felt I'm not saying necessarily better than like a Better Call Saul because that show's like, again, also a masterpiece and just so well done from beginning to end, by the way. But this was also like it had that same familiar feeling of like saying goodbye, and I hate goodbyes. I hate them. So like saying goodbye to Cobra Kai makes me emotional just in general. But it kind of felt different. It felt a little bit different. Maybe it's because like Karate Kid will kind of continue, and who knows if we ever see some of these characters again, maybe spin-off shows and stuff. But just kind of looking at this like in a vacuum, it'll always be a legendary, 6 seasons, just incredible stuff. So hats off to everybody. And it's sad thinking even right now, like I've recorded, I think, reviews for the last 3-4 seasons. I think I've done videos on, or at least I've made 3 or 4 videos on it. It's sad to like having not do this again. Like I'll probably watch the Karate Kid movie and we can talk about that and future spinoffs and stuff. But to not talk about Cobra Kai kind of when it's fresh, like to never have to do this again, or actually be forced to never do this again, it is sad. It's a sad feeling. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure as always you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.